What's up, everybody? Kyle from Scram Speed here in the shop this morning, installing some TIC lower control arm relocation boxes on the blue Trans Am known as the ZAM. We got these things a while back, and I've had them sitting on my desk. They're really nice. So they're TICs, made to relocate the lower control arms up so that way you can get more separation out of the car, or down if I guess you want to squat it really hard. But I've had these sitting on my desk just hanging out for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. And I've had a million people ask, what is that thing? It's so nice, and look at it, and when are you gonna install it? And if you do, let me know how it goes and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought I'd make a little video this morning as I'm installing these bad boys. Rock Solid has a really good video of these installed that I watched, and they do a good job explaining everything about how these things are actually installed. There's just a couple quick things that I wanted to go over on my install that differed from theirs, so that way if you run into the same things, don't worry about it. They just recently started making these out of two-piece billet steel instead of having it be a box that was welded together, and then these used to actually be welded on the inside and were different pieces on the outside. Now it's all one unit. Really nice. Really nice units. These things are really badass. But what it looks like that you're gonna be installing in is something like this. This is the lower control arm area on my 2000 Trans Am. Yours probably looks about the same if you're gonna install this. I have lower control, or I have subframe connectors from Chuck Burkhart. These were put in by him when I had the first 850 cage put in the car, and they are kind of in the way, so that's gonna have to be cut out and removed, obviously. Some people have the large box-in style, like you see in the Rock Solid video, that actually go all the way around. This car doesn't have that. You may not have any subframe connectors on your car, which in case if you're planning on doing these brackets, I would highly recommend doing something. But this is pretty much what it looks like. It seats against the bottom here on the top, and then you trim this guy off entirely and then notch it out here. I have the other side already kind of done, or at least mocked up, so that way you can check out how much had to be cut out of the car. It looks something like this. It sits really good against the top side, and it's perfectly square. Everything went pretty smooth this morning, and I was fitting that up and went right in there. But it did differ from the video and what I've had other couple people tell me for suggestions just a little bit. The first thing that I ran into that was an issue was getting it actually square to the car. And the reason for that was this panel right here on my car, this curve, was actually really gradual. So this corner was getting caught and it couldn't go anywhere near square without being all back and forth. So what I had to do was just take a punch and just hit this a whole bunch of times. It was actually about a 3/4 wide chisel, and just hit that a bunch of times and make it somewhat square in there, and then take the actual corner of this side and round it off a little bit so that way it would fit that contour perfect and actually sit really square inside of the car. Once I got that done, the second thing that I noticed as far as going back and forth was the bolt hole actually doesn't line up. Let me move the light so you can see it, but the bolt hole, because I was planning on putting a bolt in there and line it up, it actually doesn't line up perfectly. It is off by, I'm gonna say like 3/16 of an inch or so. It's not off by a ton, but it is off by a little bit. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see that it is off. So I couldn't exactly use that. Other than that, it fits really nice. You know, every direction fits really nice. Put that light back. You guys probably don't have this in your car. It's just a bar that I made before I coated the chassis. It's just a, 1 5/8, 120 thousandths actually thick piece of tube that I welded in there just for an additional support before I painted the chassis. But it's gonna get welded all the way around here, and this is gonna stay and get welded on. The bolt doesn't protrude through the other side, so that's not a big deal. You want to leave that on there so that way you can actually weld this side to it and all the way around the whole perimeter. I did cut my subframe connector back a little bit so that way I can just box the inside of it. The other thing that I kind of ran into was how far to trim this back so that way the bolt recesses. Here's the bolt right here, actually. So when the bolt recesses in there, you want to make sure that you have enough room to put a socket on it or something, right? So you have to make sure that you trim this far back enough so that way not only can you weld a piece on there, but you have enough room for your bolt to go in. And then on the top unit, there's a piece here. It's kind of hard to see because of the light. Pull that up. So the top has a nice big thick piece. It's about I don't know, it's at least 2 or 3, layers thick that you have to drill through to get to the top bolt. So if you're putting the top bolt in, you want to make sure that not only does it go in, right, easy with a bunch of room, and that's just a hole saw cut and then I notched it, nothing fancy. You want to make sure that it goes in, and then once you get it starting to screw, if it gets tight or you have an issue with it, you want to make sure you put a tool on it and leave enough room around the bolt so that way you can get a socket on it or a ratchet. I actually prefer ratcheting wrenches for things like this, so I made sure that I had the ability to put my ratcheting wrench on, so that way I can tighten it down and take it off. That's just kind of how I mocked it up. But that comes in really handy, so that way you can put the top one in, which is not necessarily where it's going to be at, but if I ever decide to go full separation as fast as possible, then I can. But yeah, so make sure that when you're doing that, you've got that bolt with plenty of clearance to go in and out with no problems. One more quick thing about this install that I did is you will have a little bit of an issue with this inside piece, and they mentioned that in the Rock Solid video about beating it outwards. You do have to do that. Mine was off by a solid 2 or 3 degrees. And it probably wasn't when you had the bolt in here and you were squeezing it. It probably separated, probably push it in, and then when you let it loose, it just moves it just a tiny bit. But when I mocked this up, I did it as level on the bottom, right? So it's level on the bottom within reason, whichever way you have it, 0.1, 0.2 on the bottom. If you check it sideways though, then with it, like I said, square at the top, square side to side. If you check it, it's at about a 3 degree downward rake. Move that light. So it's at 3 degrees right now downward. So if you guys install this thing and are wondering, man, I need to get this side square, no, you don't. It can be downwards a little bit. It just kind of depends on how it fits in the car. Mine ended up being 3 degrees. Yours might be 2, it might be 4, I don't know. But if it does go downwards, not a big deal. It still fits the car really, really good. One last thing before I go installing these and find something else I need to warn you guys about is when you're doing this, I checked the lower control arm angles of both sides of my car before I took it apart, and they've always been off by just a little bit, just from the body spot compared to the diff spot. It was off by like 0.3. So if you're installing these and your hole does not line up, like mine does not line up, it's a little bit off, I'm gonna check before I do the final install on the other side and make sure that both sides from center bolt hole to center bolt hole is the same degree when the chassis is perfectly level, just to try to make it fine, so that way one side's not 6 degrees and the other one's 6.5 degrees or 7 degrees or something like that. I want to make sure that they're same side to side. So that's something worth checking if you can get your rear end square in the car with both of these mocked up before you do a final weld in. But I'm gonna get to cutting the pieces out right now and welding this side in, and then get the other side going. If I got anything else, I'll add it here in a minute. Nothing new to report. These things went in pretty much exactly as advertised. We didn't have any problem getting it in. I made sure that they were square, both this way and that way. Using this bottom mount here, I ground down that weld so it would be flat, but made sure it was right. It ended up being 3 degrees downward. And then when I got them within 0.1 this way on both sides, right about there, and they sit flat against the top. Made some little filler plates for the sides. Even made a little filler plate for this guy over here. Might as well box it completely in while I'm here. I don't really want to do this again or recoat it ever, so make it look nice, right? Bolts got plenty of room to get in and out, so yeah, everything worked real good on both sides. They fit all the little pieces in there, and it's ready to weld up now. But exactly as Rock Solid instructions say, pretty much put them in there, get them level and straight, and then go ahead and burn them in. They should weld really nice. I'll show you what they look like here in a minute when I'm done. Those brackets burn in beautifully. They really, really weld in nice. We got it done and welded up in about an hour. That's all it took. Really simple. Nothing you guys can't do in your garage. Just take some time, make sure everything fits good. You got everything lined up before you start really burning. The inside of the car didn't get too hot either. I had my fire marshal with me with a wet microfiber rag inside, making sure it didn't get too hot. But other than that, turned out really, really good. As you would expect, everything's square, lined up nice, and she is solid. Can't wait to test these things out at the track. One quick thing to add that I forgot to put in the beginning of the video is when you install these, if you're going to use an upper hole or a lower hole or do anything, and you have double adjustable lower control arms like I have, make sure that when you go adjusting those things and stick it in these holes, if you have to move it back and forth, you need to check the thrust angle of that rear end. That rear end will move back and forth in a direction, and it might not be a lot, but it might be enough, depending on how fast the car is, to drive you towards the wall or towards the car on the other lane. So make sure if you're installing these bad boys that you are setting the thrust angle of that rear end before actually taking it to the track. Just find the center line, check the thrust angle. Not very hard to do. Take it to an alignment shop if you don't know what you're doing. So, but yeah, it turned out really nice. I'm ready to get these things coated and give it a test. But be sure to check out Scram Speed's YouTube channel. If you aren't subscribed already, please do so. Find more cool how-tos, product reviews, and generalized stuff that I think anybody needs to know. So appreciate you watching. See ya.